Right. Hello, welcome back to the next episode of the Thriving Inside the Thin Blue Line podcast. My name is Monica Crawford. I am your host and owner of 50 Fierce and Fit. Today we have Heidi with us, and before I say too much, I'll let you say hello and give a brief introduction.
Hi, thank you for having me on your show. My name's Heidi Chance. I'm a retired human trafficking undercover female detective from Phoenix, Arizona. And I too also have my own business called A Chance for Awareness, where I have two missions. I have community awareness about human trafficking specifically for parents, caregivers, guardians, anyone out there that's in the care of children. I've written a book called Talk to Them, and I am excited to be here to talk to your audience about all of this.
So many great things in that whole bio there. I love it. Oh my gosh, so many things. One thing I like to speak to is I like to define my clientele, or at least my audience, is trailblazing women in male-driven fields. I think that's you. Like that's so cool. Just because of the different mold. I mean, you're in human trafficking, which we were just chatting before that I am clearly not well versed in and have not been exposed to very much, which I'm sure that might be the case for a lot of people listening. Um, and then undercover female detective, was that correct? And as a
Uh-huh.
sergeant as well. So again, a lot of women in undercover positions, that's probably not a common thing if I had to guess. I'm sure you could speak more to that here in a minute. Um, but yes, that's cool. I'm so glad we have you. This is so cool.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So the question I ask everybody on our podcast is, what does it mean to you to thrive inside the thin blue line?
Well, I think that thriving inside the blue line is making your own way. I mean, we all have challenges, especially as female undercovers, female officers, challenges with our reputation, challenges with people's stigma about us. And I think that thriving in your own way is the best way to lead yourself through your career. Making it be about making a name for yourself, building that reputation everywhere that you go, every position that you have within your agency, and then beyond, obviously. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I think that's where we met. And LinkedIn has been huge for me because it actually got me a job opportunity when I retired to another agency. And I've built myself up to be a thought leader in this space. And it is where perception's everything, social proof is out there, and all those things are part of how I'm trying to thrive within the blue line.
Very cool. I'm over here rapidly taking notes so I can make
Oh,
sure we can hit on all these like some things that you just said.
yeah.
Okay. So first thing you dug into was reputation as a female law enforcement officer. So what did your career look like early on, and how do you feel like you were able to build a positive reputation for yourself?
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, obviously, since I've got 27 years under my belt, hopefully I look like I started when I was 12. Uh, um, but I was on shifts where I was the only female officer. And in Phoenix, in an entire precinct, you've got three squad areas with, different beats. So you've got a whole shift where I was the only female back in the day. And so, obviously I've experienced things where I've answered up for a backup for someone and they've asked for someone else. And that wasn't because of me personally. It's just that time when male officers didn't see female officers quite as equals. And unfortunately, in 2025, I think we're experiencing that to this day. But it was definitely prevalent back then. And you did have to build a reputation. You had to beat those stigmas where a lot of people think that a female officer is there just to look for a husband, or we're bisexual or gay. That's why we're there. Or, there's definitely several stigmas. Not that those things are bad, but it doesn't define the purpose and meaning of every female officer that's out there, that, has worked hard for their name and their reputation and those things. So I definitely, created my own way with, being there, being as just as strong as my partner or just as strong as the person I'm backing up. Um, Not doing things to make it seem as though those other stigmas existed for me. And it's one of those things also where early on in my career, I started at 18, by the way. I did start at 18 with Phoenix Police Department. They had a cadet program, and so I was a civilian for a couple of years until I was in the academy, and I turned 21 in the academy 3 weeks before I graduated. And so I had learned early on from other female officers, you know, you don't want to be the conversation of the locker room. And, you want to be careful about who you're dating, who you're with, and even if it's where you make it a rule that you don't date law enforcement. Some people have if you're with a law enforcement officer, they have that understanding with you, but also I've known female officers that unfortunately have had several husbands on the department, and then they're talked about in a certain way. So it's where you need to be careful and mindful of those things because people do talk.
Yes. So you just hit on a ton
Yeah.
of things as far as the challenges that come with being a female in law enforcement. Unfortunately, I mean, I wrote my book, Thriving Inside the Thin Blue Line, where I talk a lot of those things too, as far as the culture and the work environment. And one thing for me that I got to a point, and of course I chose to leave that agency and seek employment with a different agency just because I felt it got to a point where it wasn't a good fit for me anymore. Um, but I recognized that I was no longer in control of basically what the department was being said about me at the department. It was like the rumor mill had taken off and it spun and it wasn't even true. Like it wasn't even reflective, but it was something someone said and then was taken as truth. And then all of a sudden that was like the understood thing of, well, she pushes her work off on so and so. Well, no, we're two rookies or like low seniority, so guess what? Yeah, we work a lot of the same calls together because we don't get to pick our beat or our calls like everybody else. So, like that's how that type of thing happens, you know? It's like, no, there's a logical explanation for this of you thinking that I might push my work off on somebody when actually that's not what's happening. It's just you always hear us going to the same calls together because of the location of the city we're assigned to, things like that. So, as far as talking about a lot of those things and taking control of what you can control, how do you feel like you were able to work your way either around or through some of those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, your reputation, you just have to be mindful that these things happen, that everyone talks shit, and that you need to um, face it head on. I mean, even if you have to be confrontational with people and tell them, listen, this is what I heard you say about me. I don't appreciate that. That's not true. I appreciate if you don't continue to talk about me that way. It's one of those things where I wish that, especially female officers, that we weren't competitive with each other as much as we are, and that we um, loved on each other and supported each other because later on in your career, you see how you could have done better. But I don't think early on you come in with that mindset because you're thinking you're in competition with everyone because you have to survive this situation until you can be respected. And it's a sad thing, and we need more experienced or seasoned female officers, especially, to go in and take younger female officers under their wing because we are losing female officers. They're quitting, they're leaving, they're switching to agencies, all kinds of things that I'm sure you've maybe experienced or heard of. And it's just sad. It hurts my heart because I had such an amazing career. Um, and I hate that I'm sad for that happening for other female officers.
Yeah, I love that you point that out because I think we, as women, we all know that for some reason. It's like we're fighting each other and nobody can really figure out why we're fighting each other. Um, I mean, the only thing that logically comes to my mind is that some females are trying to assimilate to what's already there, and what's already in place, and you can call it the boys club or whatever term you want to put on it. Um, but then if you assimilate to what's already there and they're already not welcoming of women, then you're just further perpetuating the problem, right? So, what would be some advice that you would give a female rookie, you think, as far as either finding a mentor or seeking some help or just generic advice to work through some of those challenges?
Yeah, I think the biggest advice I have is, the female officers out there may not be approachable because they're worried about their other stuff going on, but it's not like reading into their not being approachable. Like, go ahead and make that effort yourself. Because if you want it, you're gonna have to go get it for sure. Because they're not going to um, think that first. We should be. We haven't moved to that that way yet. We should be thinking that first, but moving into, go get it yourself. Go say, "Hey, I just appreciate what you're doing. I saw you on that call and how you handled it, and I really want to, learn from you." I've had several younger female officers ask me those things, and that's like very appreciated. And I, of course, would take them under my wing. But you've got to get it for yourself.
Yeah, I love
Expect
that.
things to just start coming to you.
Yeah, I love that. One of the credos that I use is we rise by lifting others, but first we must lift ourselves. So I think that exemplifies that of like you have to take control of what you can control, but also means asking for help if you need it, which can be tough. It's tough to ask for help, but especially if it's somebody that you look up to. I know for me, I love using this example. I'm still good friends with her till this day. In my academy, I met a female detective who at the time who had 15, 20-ish years on. Um, and she was just very straight, no bullshit to the point, which of course I respect. I think a lot of women can respect that too. And one of the things she said was find your people, of like know who your people are, find your people. And that was that one liner that always stuck out to me. That eventually throughout the years we became great friends. And of course if it was funny because at first she put me in my place pretty hard one day. We were
Oh,
working through like a domestic violence scenario and I asked some sort of question that I think rolled the wrong way and she like snapped back at me and I was like, "Oh,
oh,
sorry."
yeah.
But at the same time, like I respected her for that. At first, I was like, "Well, she's kind of a bitch," but then I was like, "No, I needed that." So she and I are good friends until this day, and she was a much well-respected detective there as well. So it's cool to find those women that you can reach out to, and also it's kind of like the push tap shove of like, okay, like I'm actually here to help. I might give you a good, I like to say a loving kick in the ass,
Yeah.
is the way I put it, to help guide you through that. So that's cool. Love that. Love that. Okay. So, let's go back. You said making your own way through, working through some of those stigmas. Talked about LinkedIn. That's a new thing for me too, as far as resources that I'm getting into from the business side of things. But I think would be great to throw on the radar for some people who are currently still in law enforcement. So, how did that help you, and what was that process like?
Yeah. So I don't think I realized, I mean, I've had a LinkedIn for a long time. I just didn't realize how important it was. And I started thinking through, okay, especially closer to when I was about to retire, thinking, what do I want to be when I grow up? And so that's when I first started really focusing in on my LinkedIn. I knew that I had, obviously a passion for what I was doing, and I wanted to continue that passion after leaving. And going in and posting, and perception's everything, and you need to make sure that you have things to back it up, and posts that are valuable and help people. And I have two dogs that are playing right here.
You're good. Mine are probably running around here too. I had to mute my microphone earlier when they
You're
started playing
distracting
something.
me.
Life, it's fine.
They're not my dogs. I'm dog sitting. Okay. My dogs are nice sitting right next to me. But so I think LinkedIn is super important, especially if you recognize that we focus on our 20, 25 years, and some agencies hopefully don't have to do more than that to get their pension. But there's a whole other half of your life that you're going to live past that 25 years. And it took me a long time to even see that life and then prepare for it. And then once I'm in it, now I'm focused and building still. But in the first life, in that first time that you're building your career coinciding with that, you need to be thinking about the afterlife because there is something after law enforcement or your 25 years. And so I think that making those connection requests, building relationships on LinkedIn really offers opportunities. So, for example, when I retired in October of 2021 from Phoenix Police Department, I went over to Arizona Department of Gaming, following a old partner of mine that happened to be a supervisor there. So he recruited me over there. And I was having fun doing undercover work, actually. I was playing poker with people in houses where they would lock the door, and I'm sitting at a table, probably with a couple felons, people with active warrants. I'm sure people were high around me, and I'm just trying to watch the game and establish the charges for the illegal gambling. But in that, like I said, was still passionate about what I was doing back in the human trafficking unit. So I was already starting to build that business mindset. And out of the blue, I got a call from old Phoenix guy that is now the chief over at the Attorney General's office. And he literally invited me to lunch and offered me a job. And it was because he was told that I was a human trafficking expert, and which is all true. And obviously, it's even more focused on my LinkedIn, putting that word out there. And that's what led to this other job opportunity that I have now. And I think that that is something you all need to think about at all times throughout your career.
Yeah, that's so cool. I know for me, my with my business and the way it evolved, I had the nutrition and fitness background that at one point it was an exit strategy for me. I was like, hey, I could use this to build a business, but it wasn't until that point that even business or entrepreneurship was on the forefront of my mind necessarily. So that's cool that you recognize that towards the end of your career of like, hey, this is going to end. At some point, I need to start building into the next
Yeah.
thing. And I know a lot of law enforcement officers struggle with retirement and knowing what that next step look like because ultimately it's 25, 30 years and then it ends and they're like, what do I do with my hands? Like, what do I do now? I'm sitting at home. I need a purpose. I need to, and everyone retires. I mean, you still have lots of life left to live post-retirement too, and priorities shift. And so I think I love that perspective that you've focused
Yeah.
into that
It's too
transition.
funny because at the end there, and I don't know, this is, a common thing. A lot of officers go through a divorce and you have the mess with your pension and splitting up your asset there. And I'm one of those dudes who my husband was not an officer. And so I'm giving up a portion of my pension to him and having to think about how to make that up in my second life. But it's also one of those situations where I had to retire to cut that cord because he would have made more and more and more money off of me the longer I stayed, even though I loved what I was doing and where I was. And so hard decisions that I had to make when I was leaving, were focused on what's best for me and my situation. And it wasn't even just me. My squad, we would sit, we'd have a whiteboard, we'd do my numbers. If I retired on this date, I would make this much money. I mean, it was a whole thing that I was supported by my family, which was my squad that I worked with for 13 years. So, we all need to help each other in that way as well, even with the hard decisions of leaving and what's best for us. So seek
Yeah.
out advice from everyone.
Yeah.
Book.
That's fantastic. It makes me think of
Yeah.
that gif of that guy's like trying to explain a schedule and it's like if this then this then this then this.
Yes.
It's
Oh, we
like
were
all over the
all on
place.
whiteboard. Heidi's life after this place is,
That's hilarious.
yeah.
Okay. So obviously now your business is focused on human trafficking. So how did you get into that niche and how has it evolved from there?
Yeah, so that actually started when I was an officer for about 6 or 7 years. And I happened to be a school resource officer at that time because I had a baby. And it was one of those things where I didn't get to take the police car home. You know, you have to return the patrol car keys. And so I went into the police station one day and I passed the juvenile holding area, which is where we keep kids away from adults, as you know. And I saw a girl in there because there's a little window. And I peeked in and I'm like, I recognized her. She recognized me. I opened the door and I'm like, why are you in trouble? And she told me she was under arrest for prostitution. And so this was a long time ago when juveniles were detained and, you know, mostly for their own safety, so that because they were on runaway and those kind of things. And that was her circumstance. And, you know, it was kind of a mind-blowing thing for me because I knew about prostitution. I'd been a cop already 6 years, but I didn't think it happened to kids. And so that's what inspired me. And then uniquely at that same time, I had some opportunity to go do undercover work. They were borrowing females from patrol to put some fresh faces out on the streets. And so I started doing shadows and temporary assignments with the unit back then called Vice, but now it's the Human Exploitation and Trafficking Unit. And that's kind of what started it all for me as far as going down this path. And I literally spent the latter, I mean, I did 10 years in patrol and then 13 years, almost 14 years with the heat unit. So I didn't go anywhere else. It was a blast. So I just stayed there. I was fortunate that we didn't have like a rotation. Some agencies have a rotation where you can only do 5 years undercover and then you have to leave to go somewhere else. We did have that kind of, but there was like a workaround because literally you're just getting your feet under yourself with the community, with the meetings, with the training, with all of the rapport building when you're interviewing victims, all of that at 3.5, 4 years, and then all of a sudden you have to leave. So that's unfortunate. I mean, I understand the purpose for it, um, but it is also it is there is a negative side of that. But luckily, I got to stay, and that's where I stayed and developed my niche.
Yeah. That's crazy how things happen like that. You're just
Huh?
walking through the PD and being like, I'm on light duty. There's not a whole lot going on. Can't drive my patrol car. And then that opportunity lands in
Yeah.
front of you. Very cool. Okay. So since that time that you decide or you made your way into that unit, um, how is that mission or that I guess purpose or passion evolved from starting point through what you do now and how you've turned that into a business?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I got to see the evolution of this problem and our law enforcement's response to it. So when I first started, they would only do these operations using females from patrol every now and again. And the squads that existed at that time in the Vice unit only allowed one female position for each squad. And that was because they had needed male detectives to go pick up street prostitutes all day long and arrest all the prostitutes. And that's what they did all day long. And then around that time, the whole shift of, wait a minute, these people actually might be victims, and there's more and more kids getting involved. We should really look at who's facilitating this problem and who's contributing to it, which would be the traffickers and the sex buyers. And so now, fast forward to now, these squads both of them outweigh the females outweigh the males on these squads because you need female undercovers to pursue traffickers and sex buyers. And so that is the situation that we are in, and it's a beautiful thing because that is the true bad guys in human trafficking, the supply and the demand. So I'm very happy that I got to experience both as far as seeing the difference and what wasn't really working and what is now um, actually helping people.
Yeah. I can only imagine. I did it was not really undercover. I'll say I have experienced undercover, maybe a very smidgen and nothing like that. Um, we were catching drinkers on a river floating destination, so I was just having Jello shots thrown at me
Oh,
and radioing those in. So not all the same, not at all. Um, what was that experience like for you and your family off duty while you were working in some of those assignments?
It's one of those things where, and this is to rural agencies that might be listening. Phoenix is the fifth largest city in the United States, right? And my agency, when I first got on, was I think it was 3,200 sworn, and now it's about 2,500 sworn. So we're down a lot. And even with it being that many and a big agency like that, the actual human trafficking unit, and yes, those detectives are just that. They don't have to do sexual assaults or child sexual abuse or ICAC or anything. It is just specialty to human trafficking, but it's a whopping 9 detectives for the fifth largest city in the United States. So we do run around like chickens with our head cut off doing undercover, and then all of a sudden I might see a juvenile out there and a male detective will swoop in, do a deal, and now we have to stop everything and we're going to interview this juvenile, and then we have to do search warrants and get the pimp and do bookings and other interviews and get evidence and all the things. And so they work really hard to make a dent in this issue that's really growing at a massive rate. And I think that my mission with my business is to try and assist with uh, getting prevention out there so that we won't have as many victims to deal with. And all of that boils down to two things. It boils down to parents actually talking to their kids and being involved in their lives and involved in their games and their social media and their computer usage and the phone usage. And then the second thing is law enforcement training and having patrol officers actually recognize when they are out on a traffic stop. I mean, I don't know if you had a class in the academy on human trafficking.
I did not.
Okay. And how long ago was your academy?
So I actually went through two academies. I went through our state academy, which would have been 2016, and then I went through a department specific academy that was 2018, 2019-ish.
Yeah.
And neither academy
Neither
did.
one. That's craziness because we are taught to look for gangsters and drug dealers and pimps, in that traffic stop. They're going to be super cooperative. Go ahead and search my car, officer. No big thing. I'll take my ticket. Because if they have victims in the car with them and those victims are so scared that they don't say anything and that trafficker controls their mouth, they're not going to get caught for anything. And unless you're a skilled person who knows what to look for in a trafficking situation, even on a simple traffic stop, you can discover a trafficking situation, then these guys are getting through. They're getting away with it. They're very transient. They're traveling all over the place, and I'm sure they're having contact with law enforcement, just based off of their behaviors, and they're suspicious. But if you're not recognizing it because you were never trained to, then that's a serious problem. So that is my other mission with my business, besides the community awareness and the prevention, is the law enforcement training.
Yeah. So for someone like me, and I'm sure there's many other of us, I've been through one human trafficking course, and it was because it was something that came up on my radar that I was able to go attend. And it was taught by someone from Tulsa Police because they do have a human trafficking unit in Tulsa. But that if you're a rural agency around here, you're really not dealing with that much other than what's inside of Tulsa. And if you come across something, it's like, hey, we're going to call Tulsa or the state agency that can come assist us or give us some sort of guidance on that. I know you do whole classes on these things, but for somebody who has no idea about any of it, like what would be your first couple indicators just to even like be on the radar to look for if you're a patrol officer?
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing a traffic stop, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but anybody who's super nice to you is somebody you need to look out for.
Yeah.
And these guys are very charming. They're charming to their victims, they're charming to you, they're trying to manipulate everybody, especially as a female
Hmm.
pulling them over. So they might even try and flirt with you and be complimentary. Uh, First red flag. Next would be obviously if it's a vehicle with multiple occupants, if you're able to call for backup and pull them out of the car and keep them away from earshot of each other and start asking questions, like ask about where are you going, where are you coming from, what's your relationship with the other occupants of the car? How do you know them? How long have you known them? And then see if these stories all match. And if they don't match and they have discrepancies, then we have an issue of all kinds of things. Especially if, some of the occupants look like minors, ask if they know how old they are. Um, and then obviously you're going to be identifying everybody, and you might find that you have a juvenile that's a runaway, or something else going on with someone in the car, a warrant or something. It's just taking that time to do a little bit more than just the PC for the stop. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And then as far as observations in the vehicle, if you see like a lot of luggage, if you see hotel receipts, if you see, um, you know, completely obvious stuff like condoms or, lubricants or sex toys or things laying around inside the car, in open view that you can make that observation, then all of those things go towards we've got more than just a speeding ticket here. We've got something else. And when I teach at the academy, I talk about a trafficker that was bragging on a Facebook Live about the police not seeing him. And he's not half wrong because we weren't trained to look for these kind of things. So it's very important that even basic patrol knows and is seeing these pimps because they think you don't see them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. Obviously, it's almost like you let your guard down when somebody's super nice with you, when in
Yeah.
reality you obviously should never let your guard down. But it's easier to when people are super nice with you. And there's been times where we've been taught like, hey, that's a clue sometimes, depending on the situation, because you're so used to somebody who's like so anxious they're like shaking in the car, whether they've done something wrong or not, you know?
Yeah.
Um, the luggage and hotel receipts, that's not something that I would think about being a clue, but for sure that makes sense now that you identify it. It's like stuff we should know, not necessarily know to look for, but key in on like that might be a clue, but necessarily if it's not put in front of you, you don't really think about it type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the hotel receipts, especially if it's a kid in the back seat, like, why are you moving to different hotels in different states? And then to your point about, rural areas, and some rural areas not thinking that this is happening. Rural areas, they're not thinking that drug dealing's happening, right? Or, that there's gang activity. But those people, like I said, are very transient. Traffickers are transient. They're moving from city to city, state to state, one, because they don't want to get caught by the police, but two, because they need to keep their victim isolated so that they don't stay in one place too long where their victim could get to know a normal person and that normal person would tell them to leave this situation and assist them. They don't want that. So they're constantly moving around. And so they are coming through rural areas. They are getting pulled over by rural traffic violations committed in those areas. And, you never know if they're on their way to Vegas or if they're on their way to Reno or Atlantic City or wherever they're on their way to, that you might be having contact with them en route to where they're trying to go with their victim. And that could be the big one where your contact with them helps identify who the trafficker was in the car. Tattoos are a big thing too. I don't know if you've ever heard of branding tattoos, but that's part of this lifestyle also, where and the tattoos have two purposes also. One is this trafficker is taking this victim in and trying to, give them a sense of belonging, replace an authority figure or a father figure, mother figure in their life. And so that's kind of like a family thing for everyone in the family to have this tattoo. And then the second purpose is to advertise to other pimps, other traffickers out there, these people are mine. I own these people. And I've seen pimps' names on victims' faces. So these are things that patrol officers are going to see multiple people in the car with the same or very similar tattoo. It could be a name, it could be a symbol, it could be, dollar sign, crown, king, crown, that kind of thing.
That's interesting you mentioned the tattoos because that's the one thing I do remember from that course that I took is
Yeah.
that some of the women had those like their pimps' names on them.
Hmm.
Even which of course if you're not looking for it, it doesn't make sense because it's not always like so obvious. It's like a nickname or
Yeah.
something
But
like
even if you're pulling everyone out of the car and they all have the same story and all you have, and no one's disclosing anything, no one's acting like they want to talk to you or they're refusing to talk to you, and you have nothing, doing a good job of documenting who's who, positively identifying them, because a lot of times these people lie about who they are. So that's a chore in itself. And then the tattoos and your observations. I mean, I've built a whole case before based on prior police contacts and then jail calls. And I'm able to show these people do know each other. They have traveled together. See, this patrol officer in 2018 pulled them over in a car, and they were all identified in the car together. And all of that is helpful to these cases. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And that's a great, I guess, incentive necessarily for an officer that's like, well, I can't really make sense of this right now. What do I do? At least write up an information report on
Yeah,
it.
so
Uh,
helpful.
yeah, especially with
And
juveniles.
yeah, and phone numbers too, because these people, they think you're dumb. You patrol officers in the uniform, they think you're dumb. And so they're not going to be so quick to lie about their true information, actually, their phone number to you, because you're not a detective. You're not going to be able to find the prostitution ads connected to that phone number. So if you in your report document correct and good phone numbers, later on, I can find their prostitution ads, and then we can do an undercover operation and shit rolls downhill for them that after that, because we're going to work them. So, being a really diligent person to write up as much detail as you can on these people really helps.
Yeah, that's cool. That's all great information,
Yeah.
especially like I said, for people like I literally in 8 years of law enforcement had one human trafficking course, so I got one 8 hour day in 8 years of law enforcement on anything human trafficking related. Um, which is interesting too, because for part of my career, I worked for a state agency that was based around water. So it was like lake patrol, like river patrol, those types of things. And I would imagine those would be good areas of any of if they got somebody with them, they're out doing whatever on the water. Um,
Oh yeah, yeah, especially if it's a high traffic area, like even like I don't know if you've ever been to Laughlin, but the Colorado River's right there, and they've got all the casinos and hotels right there. For sure, they're there. I mean, traffickers bring their victims to bars just to mingle and pick up buyers and have buyers solicit them. So it could be anywhere.
Interesting. Cool. Well, thank you for
Yeah.
highlighting those
Uh-huh.
indicators. Because hopefully, again, I know you're trying to reach as many as possible with what you teach, but any audience will help with that.
Mhm.
As far as your business goes and what you do in person, what does that look like?
Yeah, so like I said, my mission is community outreach and awareness. So I'm trying to get into businesses, um, like for example, associations. Uh, even if you think, okay, we sell houses, we're a realtor. I have a case involving a pimp that rented a house and did a house of prostitution out of a rental. As a realtor, you kind of need to know the indicators and that kind of situation happening and how to report and deal with getting these people out of the house that you're renting them in. So it is important for everyone. I had a case involving not electrician, but like a guy who worked for the electric company, up on the pole fixing the thing, watching a juvenile walk by with her pimp, and then she gets slapped. And, for him to have some education about what he just witnessed, and then also know how to report and where to report that, that's education to the public in that regard. So if you think about it, anyone in any area, and then even outreach to organizations where I can do this training, Human Trafficking 101 is what we call it. And it is where even I might be talking to potential men in the room that may in the past have purchased a prostitute. And maybe now that they realize from my talk how they're contributing to that issue, and they may stop that behavior. And then ultimately, my ulterior motive for all of the community outreach and awareness is I've had successful cases where I had one pimp who was a familial trafficker. He was trafficking his niece and 17-year-old stepdaughter and five other adult females. And we went to trial for 7 months. And he was found guilty on 101 out of 105 counts and sentenced to 493.5 years, which is a record for the United States. And I constantly talk about that case because I want people to realize that only happens when you have an informed public who was sitting on my jury, because I testified that some of those victims were walking freely down the side of the road with a phone in their hand, but I'm telling the jury they're a victim, number one, and number two, they're not free to leave. They are trapped, even though they might be out on the street with a phone in their hand. And having a jury wrap their head around all of that and still find this person and hold them accountable, find them guilty, that is why I do my community outreach, because I want other officers to have successful cases like I have. And that only happens with an informed jury.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Very cool, but wild
Mhm.
that you not only worked an airtight case, but you also educated the jury to come to the same, like, to come to the logical conclusion that needed to happen. But we know juries are wildly unpredictable depending on backgrounds and
Yeah.
bias and all those things. But you were able to reach some common ground with that jury to get them to come to that logical conclusion for a conviction.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where you need to really bring in an expert witness to testify to the lifestyle so that they have a full understanding.
That's cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome. I love that. Well, this has been very informative. Just from an outside perspective, and we've only crossed paths a couple times. I look forward to working with you. We're both going to be instructing for a different breed, which is a new up and coming organization, that law enforcement training organization that I can link the info to that. Do you have any classes, or what do you have coming up as far as your classes, either with them or on your own?
Yeah, so I am currently writing up a 2-day female undercover school for them. So then, it's one of those where you have a lot of male detectives that are out there trying to teach a female undercover work. And I think it's best coming from a female who's actually sat on that couch and had her boob grabbed by a suspect and, offered drugs and sat with a pimp and been screamed at by a pimp and those kind of things. So it kind of is best from someone who's actually done it. And so, it's not a lot of females out there teaching a female undercover school. So I think it's super important. And then obviously I do have a whole human trafficking. It's either a 2 or 3 day that I'm hoping to, write up for a different breed. And it's basically, obviously, the patrol recognition of this situation and how they respond to it. And then I'm a forensic interviewer. And so interviewing these victims, it's a different kind of interview than a kid, like, and, at the school that disclosed to the school counselor that they're being molested. That kid wants to talk about their situation. um, these kids are in love with their trafficker. They're loyal to them. They're mad about sitting across the table from you. And you really have to have some skills to get them to even talk to you at all. And so talking through how that looks and what it's different from a typical forensic interview versus a forensic interview of a sex trafficking victim, especially a juvenile, is very important to share on how to do that, because I'm not going to be around forever, so I need other people to understand how to do that. And then interrogating these suspects, especially as a female, they love to talk, especially if it's a female, because they think that you're dumb and that you can be manipulated just like their victims. And
Mhm.
so it's actually a strategy to have a female detective interrogate a trafficker. And I think that that's a skill also that needs to be more talked about. I don't think anyone's presenting on how, as a female, to interview a trafficker. And then putting these cases all together for successful prosecution. I mean, that one case is a record case, but I've had several where I've one victim and I've put trafficker away for over 100 years. So having a class talking about how we reach those wins and inspiring officers and detectives to do all of this work, because these cases are not easy. These cases are actually really hard. Homicide cases, they have it easy. Their victim is dead right there. They're not going anywhere. They're not going to go back to prostitution. They're not going to go use drugs or rob somebody or do other crimes. So, or disappear. And so inspiring detectives and officers to go through all of the bullshit that you're going to have to go through to get this case finally to a resolution, plea, or a trial is a lot of work. And a lot of people don't want to do all that work. but showing the wins and these 100-year sentences and talking about, how fun it was to pursue this trafficker, really was, is what I'm hoping to share in my trainings as far as that goes. And then I also have a class on money laundering and illegal enterprise. I've had four pimps, and I'm just one detective in one part of the world, four that I have rearrested because they either went to jail and then their victim changed their mind and didn't want to press charges. So unfortunately, they got released, or they went to prison. They did their time because they may have been around for a minute by now. They did their time, they got back out, and I had another case with them, and they were pimping another kid. And so obviously, nothing's happening at jail or prison that's reforming them. So we need to do more to take their shit. And that is the financial investigations that a lot of officers don't get training on. And I didn't have training on this. I'm just learning by doing, but I want to share how I'm being successful at it so that we can start pursuing these traffickers for financial investigations, taking them out at the knees, seizing all of their stuff so they have nothing to come back to when they get out and they can't pick up where they left off. That is most important to me right now because this shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think that right there is why a lot of cops feel like they can't win anymore as far as
Yeah.
working any sort of case. It's like, well, what's the point? Because fill in the blank X, Y, and Z. Like the prosecutor won't push this through, or they're just gonna get probation, or
Yeah.
da 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 da. But if you can present it in that way of like going through this investigation and tackling it from A to Z in this order with these tactics will absolutely remove the problem because of X, Y, and Z of like essentially they can't go pay for sex because they ain't got no money. Like that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's a great way to look at something and bring it back to what you focus on, what you control, and how you can positively impact your society and whatever it is that you want to go after instead of saying, well, I can't do shit because no one else cares.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. Cool. Well, you are a huge mentor, a huge role model for many women in law enforcement, and the guys too coming up wanting to learn this stuff because obviously we need the support of the men too. Um, and you've done a lot of really cool things that I think a lot of women, even myself, and just the small snippet of what I've been involved in, probably wouldn't even know was possible if it weren't for for you having such a big voice and a stage for these things. So definitely thriving inside the thin blue line throughout your career and even after, which is very cool. It's very cool to also show other women what's possible post career as well. Getting into LinkedIn, getting into your career, and the business side of things after that. Um, you've definitely done what you've needed to do to like we rise by lifting others, but first we must lift ourselves. You've done that throughout the last, you said you were there at least 27 years, so 30 years and beyond in your entire lifetime, essentially. The other credo I love is we're one decision away from a totally different life, and I think you exemplified that too with the SRO example of like, oh, I have this opportunity, and now it's going to be the most important thing in my life that I can make a positive impact on and go do. So, very, very cool.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to reach out to you and get a hold of you, what would be the best way to either pick your brain for a mentorship, lifestyle, career, or even just to work a case?
Yeah. So LinkedIn is obviously under my name, Heidi Chance, and I'm pretty responsive in the messages there. I think this opportunity with a different breed is special because joining that community, you can, because we don't know in these LinkedIn groups, like I'm part of a human trafficking investigators group. I don't know that everyone in that group is even cops or law enforcement in any way or prosecutors. We don't know. But at least with a different breed, these are vested people that, if you reach out to me in that community, I won't even have to ask you if you're a police officer before I answer your question. Obviously we can be there to guide you in all that you are working and the cases that you're working. I'm also on Instagram. A Chance for Awareness is actually my business at chanceforawareness.com. So on Instagram, it's got an underscore in between each word, but I'm very active there because, again, Instagram is more for me reaching parents and community members with that idea of knowing about what human trafficking is and then preventing it. And then in with doing all of my community awareness, I kept getting asked the question, how do we talk to our kids about this? And so that's why I wrote my book, Talk to Them, because and I modeled it actually after how I would conduct an interview with a kid, to give parents a strategy on how to have these difficult conversations about online safety, for the prevention, because this is an overwhelming problem. These pimps sit on their ass all day long and use our devices, computers, social media, the games, just to send messages out there to hundreds of profiles every day. And unfortunately, our kids are engaging with them, and that's how they're getting them. This is the new white van, these things here. So it's very important that parents talk to their kids about what it looks like and don't depend on parental controls, don't depend on the school talking to them for you. It has to be the job of a parent these days to do that. So a chance for awareness on my Instagram, my Facebook, all the same. And then my website at chancefororawareness.com. So that's what I've got going on.
Awesome. I'll be sure to grab all that and link that for you. I'm glad you brought the book up. I know you said that in the beginning, and I forgot to work back to that, but I'm glad you threw that in there. That's a great resource too, because a lot of parents just don't know until it's the same thing. They don't know until they're educated. And especially in this day and age, comparing a phone to a white van, man, that's such a visual. That's such a visual right there. Um, but it is. Social media is a wild, wild world, especially with Snapchat and some of those things where it's much easier to hide what's going on behind closed doors too.
Yeah. hmm And these companies aren't working with us. They're working against us actually, with not verifying age, with letting, things be shared that are exploitive, all kinds of things, and then letting strangers talk to kids. So all of that is not helpful.
Right. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time. I would love to revisit with you. We need to have you back because there's just so many topics we could hit and so much more than just an hour can handle. Any final words for anybody listening out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, um, as far as your audience that's not law enforcement, we definitely need your help to report these things. You may not know or want to get involved. There's ways to report without having a patrol car show up at your house. You can call on the phone. There's hotlines where you can send a text message now. You can email. We have the National Human Trafficking Hotline, but that's all the way in Washington, D.C. And so there's a delay of information getting to the right city, to the right police agency, to the right detective that will actually work it. So if it's a crime of progress happening right now, that would still be a call to 911. Or some states are coming up with their own human trafficking hotlines. So research that, put it on your fridge, have it available, program it in your phone. So in that way, if you witness something, you know how and where to report.
Yes. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. For anyone who is interested, please like, subscribe, let us know if you have any questions. I can always forward your questions to Heidi, or I will link all of her contact info, in the show notes so you all can reach out to her as well. Heidi, thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Hang out for me.